Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Office Hours. Look, it's the name of the show. That's what we're doing. It's episode number 88, in fact. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to talk about game mastering. That's what we do here on Office Hours. Every episode, 3 questions from you to me, along with your adorable voices. And then we just talk. We just talk for an hour about the various vagaries of playing role-playing games and running them and designing them and putting them on the internet. Today, we have a pretty good selection of questions, a bunch of fairly different questions, and I'm really excited to get into the episode. But before I do, if you have a question, if you're watching this and you're like, how the hell does this work? The way it works is in between episodes, there is a website on the internet, www.adam-koebel.com. There is an Office Hours link on that website on the internet. And if you click that link, there's a form. Fill out the form, record your voice, upload the link. The page walks you through it. And then I will get your question. And here we are. And so every week I answer 3 questions. I think we're at the point now where we're far enough in that there are some topics that I'm kind of revisiting. I'm starting to kind of look back at the earlier episodes and think, do I have a different answer about this? Do I have different thoughts about this now? It's really weird doing something for as long as we've been doing Office Hours, because I think that there are early episodes where, and this would make some fun bonus content, where maybe I've changed my opinion, or I've drifted somewhat, or I found a new game that helps answer a question that maybe didn't exist, 3 years ago. So, or 2 years ago, however long we've been doing this. But yeah, so that's kind of been a neat thing that I've been up to of late. Now, our first question comes in, and it is a question about, and this is a question I've definitely answered before, but I want to talk about it again because there's some products now that answer this question that didn't exist before. This is one of those questions. Let's take a listen.
Hello, Adam. Long time, first time, you're awesome. My handle is Firth is a Word, and I have a question for you. The D&D 5e Essentials Kit that's coming out soon is rumored to have rules for one-on-one play. So, I was hoping to hear your thoughts on playing RPGs with one player. Why is 5e so poorly suited to it, as you've said before? In your experience, what makes a one-on-one game work? And what system would you recommend for it? Thanks, and have a great day.
So Firth is a Word. This is a great question. I think this was one of the very first questions we ever got on Office Hours. And I think this comes up a lot because without dipping too deeply into hot for teacher territory, I think that a lot of us live in a culture that rewards and encourages dyadic pairs of human beings, right? I think that it encourages this core idea that the center of your social world is you and usually a romantic partner. It's usually a person and their husband, a person and their wife. There is this idea that the most kind of socially reinforced relationship tends to be that one. And so a lot of board games, a lot of role-playing games, a lot of video games, people ask, what is a good game for me to play with my blank? This is often usually the person that you are sharing your passions with too. So if you are getting really excited about role-playing games, say you've watched a couple of episodes of Court of Swords, you watched some Far Verona, maybe you're a Critical Role fan, maybe you just have seen a lot of the discourse on the internet about role-playing games. It's a big time for RPGs these days. Maybe it's something you're getting really into, but your close personal human, maybe they're not that way. Maybe they're not a fan of Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games yet. And you're like, you know what? I want to introduce you to this thing, right? I want to introduce you to this thing that I love. But because you're a fan of it, you know that it's not that easy. These games are not designed for that kind of play. As is astutely pointed out, 5e especially, I think is a balanced nightmare when it comes to trying to run a game with 2 people. And what's funny is that 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and honestly 4th and 3rd as well, 2nd to a lesser degree, but each edition of Dungeons and Dragons seems to support fewer and fewer people, which is interesting, right? like D&D, when I started playing, all of the adventures were published for like 8 to 12 players. And if you go back and you look at especially the basic adventures, that game was casually and commonly played by, 14 people at a time. And I think it's because historically role-playing games were an offshoot of war games, which are traditionally 1v1, and a bunch of people would get together and play the same game together of D&D, and it was like a big change for them. And so we leaned into this group thing, and then living in this kind of isolated dyad enforcing culture that we're in. Also, everybody's so busy, right? It's much, much easier to get your roommate to play a role-playing game with you than to get your roommate and your best friend and their boyfriend and then their boyfriend's best friend. Like it's much harder to schedule, 5 moving pieces instead of just 2, especially if it's somebody that you cohabitate with. So I can totally see why people want to play 1v1 role-playing games. I can absolutely understand the desire to do it. I think it's really cool to be able to engage in that kind of like creative process with people. I think it's massively rewarding. But we have a couple of big blocks in the way, right? The first of those applies to just about any traditional role-playing game. We'll talk about some games that are designed for one-on-one play, but most games become, for me, too much pressure to run if it's one-on-one. Because if there's a group of people and I need a second to do something, or honestly just fucking pump the brakes and cool my brain down after an intense scene. If we're playing with a group, I can say, okay, Maharib and Unnamed, let's have a quick scene with the two of you at camp having a conversation about the battle you were just in. And what I'm doing is I'm inviting them to talk about their characters and to have a moment together, but I'm also asking them, hey, Zeke and JP, give me a fucking break, right? My brain is operating at maximum heat capacity. I need a minute to just like take a drink, cool down, adjust some notes, pull up a new map. Like I need a minute. And in a group dynamic, you can do that, right? And this is, for me, this is something that I got called out for this in a cute way during the live Loading Ready Run show that we did at Magic Fest in Seattle. There was a moment where the players did something that I didn't expect, and I needed a second to adjust. And I've gotten pretty good, I think, at obfuscating that, like trying to create a seamless experience where it doesn't seem like I'm taking a break. So I have a few tricks where I'll be like, hey, if you could just do this for a minute, that will buy me a second. Sometimes it's just like 10 seconds to do a thing, but that's enough. It'll buy me that time to be able to do it. So they did something that I didn't expect, and I needed to check my notes, and I needed to look up a rule for something, and I asked for a skill check, and all I needed was the amount of time it took for them to look at their sheet, figure out the modifier, grab the D20, roll it, do the mental math, and announce what they got. I needed just that tiny window of time to pop open another document and check something, right? And so I've gotten quite good at using the players to buy me time and entertain each other in those moments. But in a 2-player game, there's nobody to do that with. I have found in my experience with 2-player games, and I kind of got to thinking about it more after you asked this question, Firth, about what I would do if I wanted to do a 2-player game. I find that it's so tiring. Like I couldn't imagine playing more than a couple of hours, like a little 2-hour game. You would want something that would allow you to foist some of the creative work onto the other player, because otherwise it becomes about taking on all that load yourself as the game master. And that's a lot of work. Now, obviously, if you're not streaming your game, if you're not playing on stage, if you're not trying to entertain an audience, there's still that performance role, because you're performing for the people at the table, but you can ask for a break in a much more clear, straight up way. Like, you can say, okay, give me 5 minutes. I need to like look some stuff up in the Dungeon Master's Guide, go grab a drink or whatever. But in a 2-player game, it's much more intense. I think it turns all of that stuff up because you have no chance to calm down or chill out. And that's hard, right? That's very hard to do. And so I think the thing that you want to be able to do in a game is look at the responsibility in the game and see what kind of work needs to be done. So in a 2-player game, the GM's responsibilities, let's talk specifically because we'll talk about 5e. So in a 2-player 5e game, if it is one PC and one game master, the game master has exactly the same responsibilities as they would have in a 4 or 5 or 6 person group, right? Like they have exactly the same amount of stuff they need to do. They have to manage the encounter. They have to keep the themes in play. They have to remember all the NPCs' voices. It's no different. And in fact, having only one player to rely on makes everyone's responsibility more because now there's only 2 people to remember the rules. There's only 2 people to write things down, to take notes, to engage in the situation. And the GM in the 2-player situation, the GM is responsible for literally everything else in the game besides what the player is doing. And this is why 1v1 play or one-on-one play doesn't make sense for new players and kind of short circuits that, hey, I really want to teach my boyfriend D&D. It short circuits that loop because now you have to know and teach all the rules. You're doing that alone. You don't have a Dave or a Dan in the party to help when another player doesn't know how their spells work, right? If you watch me run either Roll20 Presents or you watch me run Court of Swords, I will turn mechanics questions over to those 2 players so that I don't have to deal with them. Like I can say to Dan, what's the DC on this spell if you're 8th level, right? And Dan will know that question's answer. If you're playing one-on-one with another player who has never played before, and you're trying to teach a fairly complicated game, which I know the idea of calling 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons complicated might tweak some people. So there's going to be people who are going to say, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, complicated? Pfft, no, come on. We're not playing Harnmaster here, right? Okay, like fair. But I have experienced this myself where I'm bad at judging. I'm the same. I'm bad at judging complexity once I've mastered or semi-mastered a system, right? I stopped thinking that the Dune board game is complicated, but as soon as I show it to people, they're like, you're an idiot. Like you have your head up your ass. This is extremely complicated, which I've had to like remember. Okay, yeah, so it is complex for people who don't have experience with it yet. So 5e is poorly suited for one-on-one play simply because it's fairly complicated. It has a fair amount of like specific rules that you need to remember and to know. And it has a lot of nested subsystems, right? It's not just like learn one thing, apply that thing to everything else. It's learn one thing and then learn all of the ways that that thing is variable depending on the fictional or mechanical situation that you're in. So it's poorly suited for one-on-one play purely because it's complicated. But I think it has a lot of like cultural weight behind it, which makes it advantageous in this situation, which we're not going to get into it. But I think that what I'm talking about now covers a lot of what makes D&D have so much staying power, because there's this loop where Dungeons and Dragons and its mechanical systems inspired Final Fantasy. They inspired World of Warcraft. They inspired, to a degree, Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone and pretty much every fantasy role-playing game that has ever been made for whatever platform owes something to the design of Dungeons and Dragons. And so what we often do when we're trying to teach someone something new is we will find something they're already familiar with that's adjacent to it. And Dungeons and Dragons is adjacent to so much that even if you have somebody who's only familiar with a 3rd tier thing, several steps away from Dungeons and Dragons, you can say it's like World of Warcraft in these ways. It's like Final Fantasy VII in these ways, right? So you're able to draw these connections and say, well, I know in Warcraft, these are the classes, but in Dungeons and Dragons, these are the classes, but you don't have to fundamentally explain what a class is. Now, I don't know that I'm saying this because it's a strength of Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's just part of what gives it staying power and what makes it a kind of lingua franca of tabletop RPGs. In the sense that it's there and it's familiar because it's so prevalent. But I think it's pretty suited for group play where you have a group supporting each other. And I think this is a fundament of just the way the game is designed and the culture around the game. But I think it's also part of, and this is a term that comes up all the time when you talk about 2-player games, it's balance, right? Game balance is, and trying to operate under the idea that 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is somehow balanced in the sense that there is underlying math that is applied equally to all character types and all monsters. There is a fundamental language that we can use to understand creating situations and engaging in encounters in that game. I think that it's folly to believe that in the first place, right? I've seen over and over and over in my own experience, and you've watched me go through this, you can't use the tools that 5e gives you to balance the game for the amount of players it claims it's designed for, let alone attempting to balance the game for one player, right? I mean, let me look at what's an appropriate encounter. Let's say a medium encounter for one first level character. So a first level character apparently can take on as a medium encounter very little. I'm trying to generate a random encounter and it's finding me nothing. There's a bunch of CR0s I guess you could fight. Here we go. 4 vultures. 4 vultures and 2 rats is a deadly encounter. It's very, very hard to, 2 commoners, a single goblin, an owl, 3 goats. You could fight 3 goats if you wanted to. There's not a lot of room there because the game's right. Exactly. And as Tristray pointed out in chat, it's probably still a coin flip as to who dies. It's not designed for 2 players, which is interesting because when the Essentials kit first started kind of percolating, the Essentials kit is let me find out what. I'm doing a lot of research today while we stream. So Essentials Kit D&D, I want to read you the marketing text for it. So according to Wizards of the Coast, the Dungeons and Dragons Essentials Kit contains the essentials you need to run a D&D game with 1 dungeon master and 1 to 5 adventurers. A newly designed rulebook onboards players by teaching them how to make characters, and the included adventure includes a new one-on-one rules variant. So the Essentials Kit is made for new players. It's made for people who are not used to D&D. It's meant to be an entry point into the game. And it contains rules for one-on-one play because I think they know that part of their audience wants to do this thing. Now, when it came out, people were excited. They were like, how are they going to modify the game for one-on-one play? What could they do? When it came out, we learned it's not really one-on-one play, right? We learned that it's 2-on-1 play and one person plays 2 characters functionally, right? You get to play a character and you get to play Batman, and then there's also a Robin, but you're still responsible, still an NPC. It doesn't take any of the load off of the player. All it attempts to do, all one-on-one play, player and a sidekick attempts to do is replicate 2-on-1 play with an NPC, which doesn't make the game any easier for the game master. So that heavy weight that's still there, it's in fact it's heavier because now the GM has to know the rules for another character, right? Or the player does. And in these kinds of situations, these kind of one-on-one player situations, it's not like the player is going to say, I'm going to learn all the rules for being a first level wizard and I'm going to learn all the rules for having a first level expert sidekick. Right? They're going to say, I'm going to do whatever you tell me I need to do, GM, and then I'm going to roll whichever of these funny objects that you want me to roll. So I don't think, despite the fact that it has all of this cultural cachet, I don't think that 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is an appropriate choice for a 2-player role-playing game. Now, the trick is that I think a lot of the games that are designed for one-on-one play might not be as accessible for that kind of audience, right? Now, I'm not saying I think that this is the weird thing, is that we think of a game like Breaking the Ice, right? Breaking the Ice is a 2-player role-playing game, and it's about, I think, going on dates. Yeah. So it's a 2-player game. There's no GM, and it's about going on dates. And somehow, for some reason, as gamers, we think that a game like Breaking the Ice has somehow got a higher barrier to entry than a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty likely that more people on planet Earth have gone on a date than have ever swung a sword or fought a dragon or been in a dungeon. I mean, some of those people have a date in a dungeon, but that's for a different show. But I think it's weird because we have this idea of what makes content accessible. And I think that a lot of people feel, again, people who maybe consider themselves gamers or partway gamers, they consider themselves more comfortable with pretending to be an elf and killing orcs than they do sitting down with a friend and pretending that they're on a date. They're fictional people on a date. And I kind of get that. And if we extrapolate that out, there's some cultural reasons why we might be uncomfortable with that. But I think it's interesting. I bet you if you asked a group of non-gamers which of those 2 games they wanted to play, you'd have a slightly different spread than if you were to say, who wants to play Subterranean Combat Simulator versus who wants to pretend that we're people on a date and like have a fun little experience that way. Like it's material. And so I think a lot of one-on-one games tend to lean more into a-traditional narratives. I don't know off the top of my head a fantasy, a one-on-one fantasy game that was designed for that, but I'm not totally sure how you would get that experience. I'm not sure what system I would recommend for it, because even like Dungeon World is not it's not suited for one-on-one play. That's not the thing. So I don't know. I'm sure that those games exist. I'm sure that somebody has attempted to solve this problem. It is a fairly common problem, but I have never had a positive one-on-one like fantasy role play experience in this context. I think if somebody asked me to play a 2-player role-playing game with them, I would probably pick something GM-less. I would probably pick something like Microscope or something like that. Something that shares the responsibility to begin with. A Quiet Year, I think you can play with 2 players, right? This idea that you could play a game that introduces collaborative storytelling without all of the sort of kludge that comes along with a more complicated rule set. And I guess I wonder, it depends on your point, like why you're doing this, right? Like if you want to have a fun activity to do with a close friend or a roommate or a spouse, this would be a way to do it, right? Find a game you could play in a one session go and do it, right? A GM-less game where you could do that thing. Yeah, there's that 2-player cops and robbers game, that chase game that we played. Yeah, Parsley games. Though Parsley games aren't really RPGs in a traditional sense. We're not going to get into taxonomy. But anyway, I might be inclined to play a 1-player game of Burning Wheel. Now, the reason that I think that this might work, there's still going to be struggle. There's still going to be like a lot of mechanics. I wouldn't play it with a person who never played before. I wouldn't play it with like a brand new role player. But I think as a GM, Burning Wheel is easy enough to GM that I don't need to worry too much about it in group play. And in one-on-one play, I could focus just on the 3 beliefs of that character, right? And I think that if you did like 2-hour sessions and you did just one-on-one play, and each session you were just like, I'm going to focus on this belief, and you let the player, because Burning Wheel one-on-one, the player is driving as much as the GM is, maybe more. And so I think that the power relationship there is easier to handle in a one-on-one environment than it would be in other games. So I think that's possible. Obviously, I'm massively biased because I'm already so comfortable with Burning Wheel. But that was the game that I thought of when Firth asked this question, right? I was like, yeah, I could probably do that. I wonder how that would be. And I've been thinking a lot about how I really miss Burning Wheel. I miss playing it. We haven't played in a long time since the season 3 ended of the Roll20 show. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I wonder if that would be a fun thing to watch, like a 2-player RPG. Yeah. The other suggestion I'll give, and this is just as a kind of final thought for Firth. If you're going into playing a one-on-one game, consider that you don't have to stay the GM, right? Do not teach your player this is the player role and it is intermediary, right? I am the experienced GM who is smart and good at this game, and you are the newbie, and as a result, you have to play a PC. I think if you come to people and say, there are 2 roles available to you, the game master and the player character, which one sounds more fun to you? And then let them choose, right? Let them pick. Because I think you could do that too, because you can still know all the rules as the player and help the GM through them, and you can still have that experience. But I think teaching people that a player role is somehow less accessible than a GM role, I think that's some bullshit. Because I learned from GMing and I learned from reading the damn book. And you don't have to do that. You got my help and a lot of other people's help. So yeah, I don't know. Think about it that way, right? Think about how can you find games that allow you to share some of that work, and then offer up the role of the GM as the beginning thing. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about a 2-player game of Burning Wheel. Anyway, thank you for your question. Let's answer another one. This one. So while you're listening to this question, I want you to put on your empathy listening hat, right? So listen to this question, and I want you to feel how our question asker is feeling. You can really there's some pain in this question, and I think you can really hear it. I feel so bad for this person, and we're going to talk about how to solve their problem.
Hi, Adam. I've got a situation that I'm not sure is my problem to solve. So we'll start with, I'm not the GM for this group right now. I have been in the past, we want me to be the GM again in the future, and I sort of feel the GM pull of, something's not jiving, how do I fix it? So a player in my group, we'll call them T. Can't stick to a character for longer than a few sessions. T will come up with a great concept, they'll excitedly share it with the rest of us, they'll begin playing it, and after 3 or 4 sessions, they'll declare they've become bored, that they want to do something else. And we've talked to them about it. We've talked to them about how this hinders the enjoyment of the rest of the group. Our games are character-focused and character-driven. When a character we're focusing on drops out of the group, the plot and the narrative are losing a leg to stand on and fall flat. But all T does is shrug and roll their new character. For example, we were, up until recently, in the middle of an arc focused solely on T's character. A cult that had maligned his family in the past had recently come to surface, and we were investigating them while they had any sort of publicity. We'd cornered a big mover in the cult, and just after the session ended, we all got a text from them that T was bored of their character and wanted to roll a new one. In the middle of an interrogation scene. They came to the next session with their new character and demanded the GM find a way to introduce him. not to the game, but to the scene. I don't know if this is my problem to solve. I've already said that, but help?
that little helpless noise at the end. Oh, Doc, you poor sweetheart. So I don't think that there's a mismatch of priority, right? I don't think that T, the egregious character switcher, I don't think that T is the problem here. I also don't think that Doc is the problem. I don't think the group is the problem. I think there's just a style mismatch where this player, T, is like, I love playing role-playing games. I love rolling up new characters. I love trying out new builds. I love coming at the narrative from a different direction. But like, yo, you're playing the wrong style of game for this person. Like, here's the easy solution. Make them the GM. Like, just make them a GM. Like, just be like, listen, if you want to play all the characters in the world, go. It's yours. Do it. That's the job. So that's my easy solution, right? Is just tell them like, hey, maybe if you can't decide on staying one character, go ahead and do what you gotta do, right? Play as the GM. Boom, done. Easy fix. However, it might be that that's not what they want. It might be that they're like, no, I just like deeply, intensely focusing on a single character. Now, that kind of desire is not inherently wrong by any means, right? Go ahead and roll up characters and play the characters you want to play. But the problem is the game structure and the player don't match, right? Like, you can switch up your character every arc, switch up your character whenever we change GMs. Like, there can be points at which it makes total sense to be like, all right, I'm done with Korthon the Destroyer, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to bring Throndir out of the closet and I'm going to play him for a little while. That's fine. But what's the real problem here is in the middle of a scene, right? In the middle of something that is ongoing in a game that is built around that. When Doc said we were in the middle of an arc that was based around their character, in the middle of a very important scene based around their character, I was like, you've made a terrible, terrible mistake, right? This player is allergic to playing characters for very long. Why would you hitch your narrative wagon to such an unpredictable horse, right? That's a mistake too. And I don't know, maybe you ask them, maybe you talk to them, maybe you're like, we need you to pay attention and like keep playing this cleric for at least the next 5 sessions for the love of God. And maybe they were like, yep, I can totally do that. And then they could be like, you know what? I have changed my mind. I want to be a barbarian now. And it's like, that's fine. But the structure of the campaign just doesn't fit. And you know what? Sometimes it takes practice before you can learn that. Sometimes it takes work to figure out, oh, hey, this style of game isn't for me. What I want doesn't work here. What I really want is to play one-shots or like short arcs or be allowed to change my character a lot. So what I would suggest, now this isn't your problem, Doc, but it's also not your GM's problem. It's not the player's problem. This is an everybody problem. I feel like that's a fairly common thing, the everybody problem, where one player is like, GM, fix it. And the GM's like, you fix it. Another player is like, I'll fix it. And nobody wants them to fix it. It's an everybody problem. Your group has some fundamental priority mismatches that need to get worked out. And as I drag out the dead horse that I must yet continually beat, talk to your players, right? Talk to your fellow players as people. Be like, yo, T, your enthusiasm, fucking awesome. Your approach, it's fucking up my Christmas. So can we as a group talk about this and fix it? Now, the solution to the problem, I hope, isn't just T packing up their things and leaving, right? I hope that's not the solution. I hope that there is a way to do it. I think you could either choose a different game that supports troop play, and somebody in chat already pointed this out, try a game like Ars Magica. In Ars Magica, you can play a different character every goddamn session if you want to. Totally acceptable. I think Star Trek has some rules for this. Blades, West Marches style game. Any game where there's more NPCs floating around than there are characters, right? Or players. So if you play Star Trek, today you could play the helmsman, but tomorrow you could be the chief of security, right? Like episodic play. You could do this with Dogs in the Vineyard. Like any kind of game that isn't reliant on, like, this person should not be playing Burning Wheel, for example. Burning Wheel is the worst possible game for this person. Even a dynastic game, even a game like Pendragon, it's like, if you get tired of playing Sir Lucas of Shetland, fuck him, right? He retires. He throws his sword in a well and he starts a farm. And now I'm playing his cousin, Sir Beauregard of Fucksburg, and now I'm out here killing shit again because that's what I want to do, right? There are other games that are structured in a different way and are not so single character progressing through the levels. There is a bit of what sounds to me like, I don't want to say it's disrespect, but disregard for everybody's play priorities here. It's one thing to have a play style and to want to play that. That's fine. T's inherent need to play a bunch of different characters is not wrong. That's not inherently a problem. The problem is the way that T approaches doing that in this kind of lackadaisical, like, text message between sessions. Peace out, motherfuckers. I'm a druid now. Boom. Here's some fan art, right? The problem is the execution seems kind of like T comes across, and I guess some of this is Doc's personal, like, suffering, but T comes across as a bit of a dick, I guess, but not really. It doesn't seem like it's on purpose. I'm not sure if everybody's just being too polite to tell T, like, hey, you're fucking up our game. So I think just putting a pause on the whole situation, sitting down together and saying, hey, so here's what I am perceiving happening. Here are the ways that I feel when you do these things. Don't make it a, hi, it's all of us against you, because that will result in that person leaving the group. But do express your feelings, have a discussion about it. Don't make it a, you are wrong and we are right. Make it a, I am perceiving friction between our play styles. As a group, how can we get to a place where, because we like playing together, right? We're friends, ostensibly. How can we get to a place where we're all comfortable playing together and we get what we need? Yeah, and the thing I'm wondering about here, and I don't want to, like, overanalyze this person I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to give people room to think and feel differently than we do, right? So yeah, talk to your fellow players, talk to T, but also talk to everyone else in the group, and really just, like, get yourself to a place where you understand each other's priorities. It might be that T doesn't realize that they're causing so much chaos. So I think the things to take away from this, playstyle needs to match among players. Playstyle and game need to match, right? If you're doing office hours bingo, you're doing great today. So play the right game, talk to your players, right? All the basic shit. Keep in mind that social balance is not a game master's job, nor is it an individual player's job. The social contract stuff is everyone's responsibility. And you can make it better by setting a good example. Right? Set a good example. Start that conversation. You're already doing a good job. You're coming here, you're thinking about it, you're caring about it. You're not just, I assume, whining about it to your friends in secret on Twitter DMs. Like, you want to make a difference. I want to understand better what what T wants. Like, what kind of game? Like, why switching characters so often? Like, what about it is appealing to you? I want to like game sommelier this person. I want to be like, tell me what an ideal role-playing game situation would be for you. Let's find you a game for you and your group. Right? Yeah, I feel your pain, Doc. Having a player who doesn't match the rest of the group can be terrible. It can be really fucked up. It can really derail things if people aren't on the same page. We're working together, right? Like, I make this analogy all the time. Playing role-playing games is like being in a band. And if half of the band thinks that they're playing jazz and half of the band thinks that they're playing ska, yeah, everybody's got horns, but it's going to sound terrible. So you need to make sure everybody's at least understanding the genre that you're doing here, right? Everybody's at least in the same ballpark. Yeah. But this sounds like a talking problem. This is a thing you can solve by like hanging out and chatting about it. And it may end with T leaving the group. That's okay, because no game is better than bad game. So this last question, I will probably have a lot more to say about it than maybe if I had answered it a few years ago. I think this is a fairly common question, and it's something that I think a lot of people are starting to think about because the space is changing.
Hi, Adam. My name is Jeremy, and I was looking to ask you, since you play so many different types of RPGs and all sorts of different types of games, and your insight as a game designer, I found that I really love RPGs myself, and I'm as my mastery in being a GM or DM or MC or whatever have you continues to grow. I'd really like to leverage those skills and start going into content creation of live streaming or podcasts of some sorts, and I was kind of looking for your insights into what are some things to consider before stepping into that realm of content creation. Your office hours videos have been a great help to me in the last couple months. I think I've watched almost all of them so far. So thank you for the great work, and don't stop.
So how do make role-playing show? How do you do it? What do you do if you want to take your game and you want to present it to the universe in a podcast form or a Twitch form or a YouTube form or whatever? What should you do? I think the first thing to like really consider is whether or not that's really what you want. Now, I know that sounds weird to start, right? Like, yeah, of course. Like, you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't want to do it? But it's probably not precisely what you think it is. It is a dramatic and sometimes subtle shift. A game that is fun at home with a limited audience, which is to say the participants are also audience, right? It changes when you introduce a third party as your audience. It changes a lot. And there is a narrative that I have heard applied to lots and lots of shows. And we've butted up against it with roleplay, particularly. This narrative that to be successful in a content creation sense in the role-playing space, all you have to do is take your super fun, cool group from home, put some cameras in front of them, and people will show up and love you. That all people want is a role-playing game that looks like and feels like sitting in someone's house watching them play RPGs. But that is usually either a lie. And I say that, but what I mean is that it's a way of marketing a show to say, we're just some pals being pals. It's not serious. It's not a big deal. We're just hanging out and you get to watch. Welcome. Usually that's horseshit. because there's a lot of like mitigating factors. And then also sometimes what works in a small group of insular folks with their own in-jokes and understanding of each other just bombs in front of an audience. So you can do it, but keep in mind that you will have to hack the game you're playing, either mildly or majorly. You need people who are not just fun role players, but people who are comfortable both being and creating content. And then you have to recognize that you are piling on a lot more additional stuff. So if you can get past that initial gate, if you can say to yourself, you know what, we are all comfortable with this. We think that we could all be fun and interesting to watch. We are keeping in mind that there's going to be an audience, and we are playing we're not playing for each other anymore. We're playing for them, right? That when I introduce an NPC, that NPC isn't for Zeke, Dan, JP, and Max. That NPC is for you, right? It's there to create a performance for you to consume. So it's different, right? It's very different, and it represents a whole other thing. Now, I've been really lucky, and I've had a few people that I have played with who are role-playing gamers first, who became good on camera, right? Or who just were good on camera because of natural charisma, right? I'm thinking about Bloodletters, right? So in the Bloodletters game that we played, that John ran, I was at the time the only professional content creator in the group. It was my channel, and I was the streamer of the group. And I played with Strash and Sean and John. And Strash, Sean, and John are all magnificent role players, excellent role players. And we lucked out that they were comfortable and charismatic in front of the camera as much as they are in person, right? That was a lucky move. That was very zeitgeist for us, right? That we have an energy that was fun to watch. It could just as easily have gone the other way, right? Because I've played lots of role-playing games with those people. John and I have played role-playing games together probably dozens of times now. And there are sessions of games, there are one-shots that we've played that I'm like, this would never make a fun thing to watch. But that show, we went in with that in mind, and it worked. But most of my experience is the other way. Most of my experience is teaching professional content creators how to play role-playing games, right? Now, I imagine that you're going to be coming from that other direction. Maybe you already have a group. I think you're almost better off coming into this space on your own, right? I think that if you are looking to get involved in the space, being a part of other communities is the best first way to do it, right? Like being in the audience for shows, participating in the community stuff, being on their Discords, getting out there and seeing what other people are doing and being a fan of it, not only will give you a better idea of what's out there, but it will empower you later to reach out to them and say, hey, so I saw you guys are planning some one-shots this summer. I'd love to GM one, right? I'd love to GM a one-shot with y'all. And if you've built up that social currency, if you are a known quality, if you've engaged in those conversations, they're gonna notice. They're gonna be like, oh, hey, Jeremy, we know you. We've seen you in the RPG channel. So yeah, totally. Let's give it a try, right? Having it can be hard because if you're just getting started, having like a demo reel or something is really difficult, but having like a little one pager you can send to people as you get started to say like, these are the games I like. This is the kind of content that I want to create. These are the sorts of environments that I would do well in, and then offer yourself up as a person that is willing to like do that, do one shots, get involved in smaller channels to kind of get your feet wet, so to speak, right? Participating, and this is true of any kind of content creation in my experience, the best way to get started isn't just to do it and play a role-playing game to an empty room, right? Like if you go out there and you're like, I'm starting a new campaign, my very first stream is going to be GM prep, you're going to be prepping to nobody because nobody knows who you are and nobody knows that you're doing a campaign and nobody knows like anything about you, right? But getting an introduction into that space, collaborating with other people, creating good content with them, and showing that you can, work as a team and that you have some talent and skill. That's the way you can build up your own brand. And I think this is valid even if you're coming into this space with a group, right? Encouraging everyone in your group to do the same, to be on other shows, to network, and to build that place within the space. That's the way you do that, right? So there's the social aspect, getting involved. There are a lot of shows that are small, that are looking for new players, that are looking for quality people that want to create content with them. So that's absolutely, there's a lot of opportunity in that space, right? And then there's all the technical stuff, right? About like, when do you stream? What do you stream? What do you need to stream successfully? And like, honestly, I feel like it's such a cliche now to see these sort of like mid-size Twitch broadcasters, of which I am one. These like mid-size Twitch broadcasters just like handing out advice as if there's only one way to do things. I can tell you how I've done it. I can tell you my experience, but that doesn't mean that it's right. Right. That's part of the platform, whether you're doing podcasts or YouTube or whatever, like doing things your own way, but understanding what else is out there. That's the way to do it. Right. Like any personal stuff that I'm doing, right. Anything I'm producing, whether it's one shots or blood letters or it's Roll20 Presents or any of those things. I learned that from being on Roleplay, like just literally just emulating some of the things, the standards and the practices that JP has for producing his shows. Like I learned from him, and then I do things a little bit different now because I've got some experience. And that, again, that'll be something that you can learn from collaborating with other people. But I think from like a baseline perspective, you have to understand the value proposition of the content you're creating and then build everything around that. It's universally true that good audio is the most important thing because not everybody's going to watch your show. There'll be people who alt tab and do other stuff who listen to your show. And if they can't hear you, or if there's an annoying noise, or if you can't hear one of the players, and 5 years in, I'm still struggling with this. We still have to sound check every episode. We still have to make sure. And every once in a while, somebody's mic will be weird or whatever. And it can bring down a whole show. So having a high standard, but also being reasonable, right? Like, don't expect everyone on your show to have $700 mics because that's just not, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. But I think it's reasonable if everybody in your group is serious about it to have like $100 mic, right? And that can be hard, but it's better, I think, to do things as well as you can possibly do them from the get-go. I can't count the number of times that I have seen, and this is just me at a great distance. I've counted the number of times that I've seen people say, I really want to get into Critical Role from the beginning, but those first episodes, they're so low production value for what I've come to expect that I just bounce off of them. And you don't want to do that, right? It can really short circuit your growth if that early stuff is unlistenable. Now you can grow, you can get better, you can improve your gear, you can improve your practice, you will get better and that's totally normal, but you want it to be baseline, like listenable from the get-go. So do a test run to nobody, right? Just record some stuff at home, do a little one shot, goof around, whatever, and then put that content out, not publicly, but to people you trust to give you feedback, right? Show it to your friends. Show it to the communities that you are now a part of and are building. Yeah, right. Create a pilot, but it's not for public consumption. It's for you and for people you trust to give you feedback, and then adjust and then get back into it, right? So yeah, it's tough to get started. It's a very busy space, but I think because it's so busy, because there are so many shows, we have room to collaborate and room to try to do something different. Which brings me to the other problem or struggle. And this, again, this is a struggle even for me. kind of sick of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's a good game, and I enjoy the people that I play with, and I like that I can engage with my audience, even people that I don't know at all, that I can engage with them and we can have a conversation about like fireballs or whatever. But I'm going to get to a point fairly soon where 3 Dungeons and Dragons games just isn't fun or desirable for me anymore. But here's the trick. You kind of have to play D&D. And I know that sucks, but if you want to if you want to get into it in a way that is easy to build an audience, you kind of have to piggyback off Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I'm not saying you should exclusively play D&D. Absolutely not. Do not do that, right? But Dungeons and Dragons alone will bring people in you would not have access to otherwise, right? Now, whether you hack it a bunch or you play it with a custom setting or like whatever you need to do to make it different and cool, do that, right? Like for me, let me tell you how I get through when I'm feeling like tired about D&D, right? So Descent into Avernus, Roll20 presents, Descent into Avernus is fun because I get to see what the people that make Dungeons and Dragons expect D&D to look like, right? That for me is fun. I have a little bit of like insider baseball where I get to say, okay, this is a module. Let's play through it. And I'm going to talk to you about what I get to see. I think that's cool. I think that's a cool thing about playing modules. So that's that show. Jace Beleren Must Die is only barely Dungeons and Dragons. It is a thin layer of Dungeons and Dragons on top of just an improvised Magic the Gathering bullshit show. I love it. But that game is barely D&D. And then Court of Swords is the setting for me. Dungeons and Dragons is a way we can engage with the mechanisms, and it's there to resolve situations. It's there to create exciting combat, and that's fun. We can engage the system mastery and stuff. But for me, what draws me to Court of Swords, what gets me fired up about running every single episode is what am I going to learn about the setting today? What am I going to learn about the characters and the NPCs and the world and all of this other cool shit? What is going to happen today, right? So I have found ways that I can appreciate it, but I think that if you're building a channel, right, you can go the route, and honestly, like I absolutely admire and appreciate, and I think that this is great that there are channels that do this, like Actual Play. God bless you, Actual Play, like playing games that people have never heard of and doing that stuff and continuing with that as your brand, I think is a bold move that will pay out in like another year or two, right? Right now, D&D is still wearing the crown of top of the pile of role-playing content on the internet. And if you want to bring in an audience, having an RPG show that is Dungeons and Dragons, and then a second show that's not D&D, I think that's a way to bring that audience in, right? To say you showed up because you're just flipping through the D&D category, which is how you can get discovered. Flipping through the D&D category. Oh, hey, this is a D&D group I haven't seen before. They pop in, they get to know the characters and the players. They get to know your vibe. They get to know maybe the GM, and then they might come back for this other thing. And it sucks because it does make non-D&D games feel like second tier. And I fucking hate that. I hate it so much. I think that there are games that are better to stream. There are games that are better designed. There are games that are better to play. But sometimes you got to play the AAA game if you want to get the audience. And I say this not just as an RPG streamer, but as a broadcaster of video games too. I will absolutely play games that are popular, even if I'm not really that into playing them, because I want to find out what they're about. And also because it helps me build my audience. It'll get people to come in who would say, oh, neat. I didn't know that, everybody was playing this game. I don't know who you are. Let me check it out, right? Let me see who you are. And then maybe they'll come back for the D&D stuff. Maybe they'll come back for these other things. So you do kind of have to do that. And for us in this space, Dungeons and Dragons is that game. D&D is Fortnite. D&D is Fortnite. It is. And it has a platform. It has an audience. It has people who will tune in just because it's D&D. They won't know you. They won't care about you. They will tune in and they will be like, I know this. Who is playing what character? I get it. You're a class. You're a class. You're a class. That's an elf. You're an orc. I get this. I'm comfortable, right? But again, maybe you're gonna find success doing something else. Maybe you're going to be the show that blows this whole thing open. So don't take this to mean you can only succeed by playing D&D. But I'm just saying D&D is a marketing tool that is available to you to help bring an audience in. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm struggling with this. I think my hope is that in 2020, I can balance it out. I'm hoping that I can do 2 D&D shows and 2 other shows, or I don't know, add another show onto my pile, find room for another thing that isn't D&D. I will say this, and this is not necessarily for Jeremy because I think Jeremy is English is Jeremy's first language, but if you are playing Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, I don't care, and you and your group are from somewhere where English is not your first language, if you are playing a game and your group is Filipino or Indian or Latin American or whatever, there is so much room for you, and we need you in this space, right? We need to show you have an opportunity to be much, much larger in the space because there are people who want to watch shows in their native language. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of room for that. You still have to do all the networking. You still have to do all of the community stuff. Just simply broadcasting in Spanish is not going to be enough, but it's an edge. It gets you in. And if your group works this way, you can do multiple shows. You could have a show in English and you could have a show in your first language. And I'm saying this predominantly because I want to see this space diversified, and I think that there is room for that. And I'm much, much more personally likely to boost a show when I know that there is an audience that wants that content, that there is an audience that is thirsty for their native language, but the kind of content that they would normally have to watch in English, right? So that's a thing to consider too. Look at the space. Are you doing something no one else is doing? What is that thing, right? Yeah, and I think chat pointed this out too, especially if you have a game that's in your native language that isn't in English. That's super cool too. Yeah, being able to see that, that's really neat. So, yeah. I don't know, it's tough, right? It's the space has changed so much since I first got into it. When I first got into it, Critical Role was still playing Pathfinder, I think. And now there are literally hundreds of RPG podcasts and shows, and everybody in content creation is trying to do an RPG thing. A lot of RPG people are getting into content creation. It's a great time, but it's a crowded room. So you gotta make friends. You gotta know people. And the people that I know, the people that I am now connected to because of playing role-playing games, people like Sean and Strash and John Harper, people like Max and Anne and Dodger, all of those people, I know them because of role-playing games. I know them because I got involved in this space. And so what you're building, it can seem like you're just being crass and networking and whatever, but you're going to build friendships. You're going to build connections. You're going to create relationships with other content creators, and that allows us all to continue supporting each other and build things. So look at it that way. Look at it as a labor of love. Look at it as something you're doing because you care about it and because you want to. I want you to be able to make money doing it, but it's a long way from where you're at now to it being a job and it can be very, very challenging, and there's a lot to it. But get involved, be a part of these communities, and like care about what other people are doing. It's so easy in content creation to just like get fixated on me. What content am I putting out this week? What am I doing? How am I going to succeed? How am I going to get more subs in my channel? Role-playing games are very deeply the inverse of that, I find, in a lot of ways, because they are so uniquely team-oriented. So I think get involved in the community, find other people who are doing stuff you like, be brave, reach out to them, at them on Twitter, and be like, hey, I like the stuff you're doing. I'm thinking about doing a show. Maybe you want to be involved. You'd be surprised. People, especially right now, people are looking for talented people to play with. So get out there. Go do it. Fucking play some role-playing games. I want to watch whatever cool thing you make. I'll do that sometimes. I'll if I have a minute, which I rarely do, I'll just troll through the D&D category looking for games that I've never heard of. I'll look for people with like 10 or 15 people in the audience, and I'll pop in and just like check it out. Like honestly, because you never know. You never know when you're going to stumble across something really, really cool. And so come at this as a fan first with an eye for becoming a part of it, and you'll get yourself connected to a bunch of people who are also really in that same space, who are really interested in becoming a part of that. So yeah, I hope that was not too daunting. I always try to balance giving people advice about broadcasting with like, it's hard and it's serious and it takes a lot, but it's also fun and rewarding and cool, and you're going to make some great friends, and maybe some money. So I don't know. I mean, I got started doing spreadsheets, but it wasn't the spreadsheets that got people to stick around. It's the fact that the spreadsheets were connected to Swansong, and Swansong was a bunch of really amazing people all working together to make a cool sci-fi show. So try it out. Get into it. See what happens. Yeah. Cool. Now I just want to like these questions always get me so fired up for GMing, and I don't have Court of Swords today, so I'm like, I got all this nervous GM energy. Jace Bellerin's gonna get it tomorrow. They're gonna get my full GM energy tomorrow. And now I'm thinking about this Burning Wheel one-on-one thing. Yeah. It'd be kind of fun to do it with like multiple people too, right? Like me as the GM, and do like arcs with different people. Yeah. Things for me to ponder. Yeah, the Burning Wheel hot seat. That sounds not. Anyway, so thank you for your questions, everybody. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming and for watching, and for your continued viewership on all these 88 episodes of Office Hours. I started this a long time ago as a weird experiment, and it turns out it's kind of working. So thank you for coming. This has been episode number 88 of Office Hours. If you have a question or a thing you wanted me to discuss, go to www.adam-koble.com. Click on the Office Hours link, fill out the form, give me your questions. I need them. Even if they seem too simple or like I've answered them before, it doesn't matter. Give them to me. Give me those questions. And we will answer them 3 at a time every time we do an episode. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. I will see you next time.